Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Morgan from Philanthropy Impact and want to welcome you to this session of Walk in My Shoes, The Good Impact. Would now like to introduce our chair for today, Mary Rose Gunn from the Fore.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. For anyone who's been to these sessions before, you know that we've only got half an hour, so we will be very swift about moving into the meat of the conversation where we possibly can be. Please do put any questions that you might have into the chat, and we will endeavour to respond to them where we can. But today we're here to discuss the good impact. My name, as Morgan has kindly just told you, I'm Mary Rose Gunn. I'm the founder and the chief executive of the Fore. The Fore is an organisation that I set up in 2017 with a mission to turbocharge exceptional small charities and social enterprises. We do that by providing unrestricted funding and access to skills support, which we convene from a range of places, businesses, individual philanthropists, and from other trusts and foundations. And we particularly enjoy working with people who are really keen to target money and skills into exciting, innovative, grassroots charities and social enterprises, people with solutions on the ground, basically, that have got scaling potential. We are very much at the beginning of the chain when it comes to social enterprise. So we are looking at really early stage organisations, and we make investments of up to £30,000, so over 1 to 3 years. So it's really very small. And it's very interesting for us to be involved in conversations with people who are very much at the other end of the chain and have expertise much further down the line, Danyal and Julian being two exceptional examples of these types of people. What I think is maybe interesting to note is that what we find is that there are a lot of social enterprises that we work with, but they often end up taking charitable status because it is so difficult to get early stage support. And many, I think, people assume that the trust and foundation sector is there to provide what is the equivalent of the kind of angel investor function in the private sector. So providing that grant funding that isn't expected to come back. Until, if you're an angel investor, and obviously until much, much further down the line. But actually that isn't what happens in the trust and foundation sector. Often trust and foundations have very much their own agendas that they are working to and their own impact that they're looking to achieve. So we do find that early stage social enterprises really struggle to get hold of funding right at the beginning when they're trying to get themselves up and running. And I think that is one of the reasons why there is not a huge pipeline of really small growing social enterprises that are coming through to take on more mainstream investment. But that's where my expertise lies. But we are here today to discuss two questions, which is why social impact is good for business and how social enterprises can contribute to economic growth and social change. We have an audience which I'm told is very varied. So we have a lot of advisors to high net worths, be they legal advisors, tax advisors, or wealth advisors. But we've also got charities, and we've got trusts and foundations and philanthropists. So we hope that this will be useful to all of you. But in order to make sure that we're catering to everybody and people who are very new to this market, I thought it might be very helpful to just very briefly say what we mean by social impact, which Julian and Daniel, please do contradict me in a minute if you would like to. But social impact from our perspective is activities that are doing something that is broadly improving society in some way. And that can obviously include climate, improving from the perspective of the climate crisis. And social enterprise is a really difficult term because there is no official definition for it, as far as I'm aware. It can be a profit-making business, a social enterprise. It can also be a non-profit making business. But I think it's generally agreed that it is a business that isn't just interested in shareholder value or profit alone. It's trying to do something that is good for society. I now would love to introduce our two panelists who are both very I think, impressive experts in this field. Julian Blake is one of the leading public benefit lawyers in this country. He's a specialist, he's written books, he knows pretty much everything there is to know about public benefits, social enterprise, charity sector, having headed up Bates Wells charity department for a long time. He is now at Stone King. And our other panelist, Danyal, Sattar, you are perhaps one of the pioneers, I think it's fair to say, of social investment and impact investing. Daniel's been involved in this area for nearly 20 years and really knows pretty much everything there is to know. So I'm going to start. Okay, that's a challenge for you, Danyal. Or a challenge for the audience. Can they ask you a question you aren't able to answer? I'm going to start by asking Julian. Julian, how do you feel that, and can you give me some examples of where social enterprise has been making things better in both public service delivery and in generating better outcomes for people and places?
Thank you very much. Sorry. I would say social enterprise has been perhaps quietly, for most people, illustrating its value, demonstrating its value in public service delivery quite dramatically. I would say it's an optimal form of public service delivery because it combines purpose with business efficiency. That means that social enterprise providers of public services are purpose aligned with the public sector, they're collaborative with the public sector and with the community generally. And so there are very, very good examples of public service delivering social enterprises. The larger ones, the mature ones, turning over between 10 and 200 million, operating across all the major sectors.
Can you give us a name that people might have heard of or experienced? Okay,
well, the largest of them is probably Better, which runs a chain of leisure centres across the country. That was probably one of the first well-established social enterprises that then went on to, in effect, in its case, dominate a particular areas of service delivery. There are lots of others, not so well known in general terms, perhaps. But they're getting on with delivering social care, delivering health services, delivering education. I mean, another way of thinking about it might be that if you think of every further education college, what is that but a charitable social enterprise delivering public benefit? So very substantial importance in public services. And then as a progression of that, to answer the second part of your question, any organisation in society has some sort of purpose, otherwise it wouldn't exist. And observing socio-political development from a social enterprise perspective, it's quite striking how often when something goes wrong, the reference is to that organisation having lost its sense of purpose. That happened with the banks, that happened with the NHS in reference to various of the crises. And so there's a critical point there. So any organising society shouldn't be losing its sense of purpose, it should be promoting its sense of purpose. And then you move on to the investment bit, because what everybody wants are organisations that are dedicated to the things that we want and need in efficient and effective ways. And if organisations can demonstrate their commitment in that, then people will want them to thrive and they'll become good investable propositions.
What do you think is, I mean, it sounds like the perfect solution that we have, you know, businesses that are there for good, that are also delivering our public services. What's holding them back? Why isn't there more of this going on?
I think the most meaningful answer to that is we're in a cycle of economic, we're in an economic era that in which we're all focused on a different way of thinking about things. So if you think about how economic eras go, we had a post-war consensus. We've then had a market-driven era of about 40 to 50 years. And that's breaking down. Whatever your politics, you can say the current version needs to focus more on the community aspect, more on the social aspect than the pure capitalist model does. So to answer your question, that's how we've all been brought up, that the market is all wise, that profit motive is the way to make everything efficient and competitive, that competition is more important than collaboration. And what the social enterprise movement is saying is, well, there's some pretty serious correctives to that purpose is important, and arguably more important since it's the direct thing we're trying to achieve. Financial considerations are the indirect proxy for the things we actually want to achieve, the missions we actually want to achieve. And this equates to macroeconomic theory. So there's some pretty interesting economic theories that are now becoming much more prominent. Mariana Mazzucato in Public Value, Kate Rayworth and Donut Economics, both of them saying, in effect, we should be driven by the social needs we have. We should apply ourselves to the social needs we have. So we need to rebalance the thinking between economic drivers and social drivers. The social drivers will get there in economic terms if we focus on them in a serious way. That's at the heart of what social enterprise is about.
And so basically, is what you're saying that the barriers that social enterprises are facing to being able to do more is the traditional market?
Yes,
traditional
and it's really clear in public
markets.
services.
Yeah,
really clear in public services, where the sorts of social enterprises that I was referencing, the ones turning over 10 to 200 million, which are delivering public services effectively, they're doing it in a competitive market which doesn't suit them.
yeah.
They're having to compete on the terms of commercial organizations and succeeding in doing so despite the system. So give them a system that's actually sympathetic to their purposes and their sense of collaboration, and we'd see much more value coming from them.
Yeah. In the meantime, are they finding it hard to get investment? Do they need more investment?
Well, yes, they are. They're finding it hard to get recognition. So in public service, we've got the commissioning side of it, which obviously needs to be a relationship between the public sector and the public benefit sector. Then we've got the financing of all of that. And the first thing to say about that is public services are massively underfunded. The funding resources need to be carefully applied in the right places. You can supplement or coordinate financial resources from other sectors too. But yes, in that environment, it isn't a really clear line of development to say, well, here's a very good service providing organization, and here's the investment that it can call upon. It has to find it from different places, a bit from the public sector, more from the sorts of organization that Danyal works with, community funding. So the more, and charitable funds and all of those sorts of things. So the more we're focused on the idea that these are the things we want to achieve, these are the resources we have available to deliver those things, and they need to be coordinated through a system that isn't just focused on how profit maximizing market competition works.
Yeah. Danyal, that's a very nice segue over to you. Julian, thank you. Would you like to just give a very quick overview of Big Issue Invest, which you lead, and what your role is as an investor in the social enterprise market, and give some thoughts on, in response to what Julian is saying, as approaching it from the investment side? Do you agree with his summary of the situation, and do you feel like that is the main barrier to social enterprises being able to achieve more, is the traditional nature of investments?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And good to hear from you both, and good to be here. Do excuse me if there's any background noise. I'm located under the arches, which is a very social enterprise place to be at the moment. So we come from the Big Issue. This is the Big Issue. It's available from your seller today. Cover price £4. It's a social enterprise, not a charity. So the vendor, the person who you see on the street who sells you this magazine, he has bought that magazine, or she has bought that magazine from us for £2. So they buy these magazines from us and they sell them on to the public, and they trade their way out of destitution by doing so. So that's what a social enterprise model is really doing. It's trade, it's enterprise. And the reason why we had Big Issue Invest is that when the Big Issue was founded, it was really hard getting the money to get it going. If it hadn't been for the Roddicks, Anita and Gordon Roddick at the Body Shop Foundation, with that early investment in the Big Issue, we might not have got going. So it was really that old observation of going, it's really hard raising money as a social enterprise or a charity that inspired Big Issue Invest. My colleague Nigel Kershaw, who founded it to be what he called a social merchant bank. We're not a bank, most certainly, but that idea that you should be able to access financial services if you're a charity or you're a social enterprise, just like any other trading enterprise. We have those same financial needs. So that's what inspired Big Issue Invest. It's what inspired a whole range of social investors who are filling this gap where the mainstream don't quite manage to extend. So that's the core of it. About 27 staff, 40 million under management, 150 investments outstanding at any one time, investments ranging from £20,000 to 3.5 million in size. That's us in a snapshot.
Do you, well, actually, first question, could you give us just a very quick overview of one of your favorite investments? Favorite's maybe the wrong word. Something fun to highlight.
They all have to be favorite. I think maybe a few would be, I like Arkbound Foundation. They publish books from authors of very diverse backgrounds, and they wanted to develop ebooks. So they borrowed £40,000 to hire 2 people to develop an ebook service and to generate more income from the same product base. I just kind of liked their enterprising spirit on that one. It repaid early. The ones that stick in my mind, We Are With You, formerly known as Ad Action. This is one of our outcomes fund investments, where what we do with that one is we are paid on reducing the number of people who turn up at accident and emergency at health trusts in Cornwall more than 5 times a year with a drug and alcohol problem. So the logic's pretty clear that A&E will save your life, but it won't solve the reason why you had a drug or alcohol problem. So if we could intervene early and make the investment that then stops the critical incident happening, so much better. We're working in Sheffield with the local council, settling people out of long-term mental health care. Half the people in this cohort should never have been locked up, essentially. Half the people should never be released for danger to themselves and the community. But it's those people who were basically institutionalized who never should have been. And again, we get paid when we successfully settle people in the community. These are some of the most direct social impact and financial links. But we've got simple mortgages, a second charge after a bank where we're topping up a loan to refurbish accommodation for 15 homeless people in Red Hill or 8 people fleeing domestic violence in the northeast of England. So everything in the sector you will find in our portfolio.
And if you are somebody who is looking at getting involved in social investment and you are very much new to this world, how would you advise them? Or if you were, for example, someone who had clients who were had heard about social investment and said, what should we be doing about it? What would you advise them to do? Where would you advise them to go to find opportunities?
I mean, I think first, please assume that I'm operating within the bounds of the law in terms of the person who I am advising at that time, because restrictions on suitable products for people to invest in are all there. But the thing about the social investment sector is that actually there's something for everyone. If you want a social bank, if you want a bank that does good, you can go to Charity Bank, you can go to Triodos, you can go to Ecology Building Society, and you can deposit money with them, and they will lend that money out in Charity Bank's case, to the charity sector, Triodos Bank to a whole range of social purpose products, Ecology Building Society for environmentally sustainable construction. So as an ordinary investor, bank deposits are there and available, as are are some of the crowdfunding websites, so long as you're investing money that you can really afford to lose as ordinary retail investors. All the way through, there are options. Our funds are only really available for trust foundations, large institutional investors. They are our primary funders. But I would say something that that I heard at the EdXL Center in East London. A friend of mine took me to see a real live Indian guru, and I'd never seen a real live Indian guru. So when Roberto said, please come along, Sadhguru is in town, I sat there with 4,000 people listening to a real live Indian guru. Always do something in life you've never done before. And somebody asked Sadhguru the question, why do you need a guru? And Sadhguru said, well, if you're going to a strange country, it helps to have a guide. And the strange country was internal. Our strange country here is social investment. So having a guide, a professional advisor who can help you navigate through this space, very useful. The other thing I would say is start. It is possible to start. I really like the bullseye approach that Access Foundation took when, as a foundation, they decided to invest 100% for impact. And they had the idea that you invest in an outer layer, in their case, social banks, social bonds, and you would gradually move closer and closer and closer in. And the center of the bullseye was bang on the mission of the foundation. But they weren't allowing perfection to be the enemy of the good here. They were saying, let's start and let's gradually allocate our assets as we can, closer and closer to their mission.
Julian, have you got, with the same question in mind, what advice would you give to people looking to get involved in this market? And Daniel's lovely idea of the guide, where would you send people? And are there any recent trends and innovations that you think it will be useful to people to hear about?
If I may say so, I think being able to focus on where the new system is working, where the socially driven system is demonstrating how it works. I mean, there's an aspiration part of it. And there's a major part of it at the moment, which is working within the current system and therefore kind of being overwhelmed by the current system, right? So a familiar way of thinking about that would be, I think everyone now recognizes what greenwashing means. It means that the environmental imperatives we have are now understood by everyone. So everyone is articulating how they're promoting environmental priorities, even though actually quite often that's a presentational thing rather than a real thing. So there's something beyond the good things that is the actual reaching the serious engagement with the real thing. So it's hard work is the most direct answer. It's really hard work because firstly, the exercise of identifying real need as opposed to assumptions about real need that get passed on by institution to institution and from person to person, it needs constantly to be refreshed and constantly to be informed by the real people with real need and those who engage with them in an expert way. And that's hard work and it takes time. And once you have reached a position where that is something that you're understanding, then you've got this whole issue that we're mainly focusing on at the moment, which is how does the organizational structure and financing recognize the importance of what you're dedicated to, support it and allow for its development. Another very tough phase of delivery. So I think probably avoiding some of the misconceptions is a good start. So you mentioned, for example, how lots of social enterprises end up becoming charities. Well, I would say almost all social enterprises could be charities. There is a brand of social enterprise that is a purpose-driven, commercially structured organization, and we want more and more of them. But there's a tendency at the moment for organizations that like to think of them as social enterprises not to realize that they can benefit from the charitable status in major ways because they qualify as charities, so they might as well be charitable social enterprises. So there's a misconception to focus on. I think it might be helpful, I mean, to answer the question from the other direction, which is to illustrate the point by some things that have really succeeded. So Daniel put me in mind of a startup version of trading that really succeeded. Okay, so about 30 years ago, the Charity Commission and charity law practitioners didn't really understand that a charity could be a trading organization, an organization that delivered its social purpose by trading, which is what Daniel's describing. We had a series of new initiatives which were about international trade, the purpose of which was to deliver a fair price to the producers of primary products, coffee, chocolate, tea. And that was very successful. We now all know what the fair trade movement is all about, even to the point of relatively recently, somebody from the fair trade movement, the original one, Fair Trade Foundation, being asked, don't you think now your product, your unique selling point is being imitated because all the supermarkets have their fair trade line, and that's not your line, is it? And the answer was no. I think we've massively succeeded. If we shifted the market so that everybody wants fair trade and all the commercial providers are selling fair trade, that's success. That's what we're really trying to achieve. That's the conversion of a market into something that wants fair trade. And if you want fair trade, now you can invest in fair trade. And if I may, I've got several of these sorts of examples. But I'll give you what I think is absolutely the best example, which we can't replicate in the UK, but we can aspire to it, which is how the Basque social economy works in northeast Spain. It starts with post-Civil War, post-war 1950s impoverishment in the Basque country, with a priest thinking that what was most important was the establishment of employment for people who didn't have employment. Started a 5-person workers' cooperative. The Basque economy is now 200 worker cooperatives with about 200 subsidiaries of worker cooperatives. It runs the Basque economy through the Mondragon Corporation, Mondragon being the original village, founding village of the first one. It's the 7th largest corporation in Spain. It's integrated with the education system. It's integrated with the local education system. And the point of mentioning this for this subject is when you hear people from the Mondragon Corporation or the Basque countries describing this, it's all about employment. Everything is geared to making sure people are fully employed. That's what worker cooperatives do. The education system feeds the worker cooperatives. And when you talk to them about a social thing, they say, no, we don't understand that. This is economics. This is how economics work. In other words, social and economic are not in conflict for them. They're the same thing. You deliver your social mission, full employment, and that looks after your local economy in quite a significant way.
I mean, I think that's something that potentially we all would like to see, is that business, there is no longer such a thing as a social enterprise, because just all enterprises are social. Yeah. John, you've jumped back on.
Yes, thank you. That was absolutely brilliant. What I liked about it was how inspiring examples are that you gave. So thank you very much. And thank you, Mary Rose, for being a really good chair and bringing that out. So wonderful. So I'm going to ask each one of you 30 seconds, final words of wisdom, and no pressure, but I'm looking forward to your inspiring comments. Okay, so Julian, would you like to go first?
Everything needs to be, business should be purpose-driven, collaborative, dedicated to the things that people really want, like good public services, for example. And if we get to that point, then it will change the system. It will mean that that's what people want to invest in. And to lead into what Daniel talks about, I would say what we really want to get to in terms of social investment is when these questions aren't asked. You say a socially beneficial investment is a good investment. We get good returns because we're investing in the right things.
Great, thank you. Really interesting, because it fits with some of our research that we've done with Gen Z and millennials who really want to emphasize doing good with their money, whether it's philanthropy or impact investing. Daniel, your turn.
Thank you. Thanks, John. I think all businesses, all investments have impact. I think what we're doing now is we're choosing to count it. and where some of our counting is happening is on the positive side. But there is the negative. And I think our big challenge and our societal challenge is shifting the balance of our whole economy towards positive social and environmental impact, and away from some of the negative externalities that we've seen before. And that's what social enterprise, that's what social investment can clearly show is possible. And I think what Julian said about Mondragon is so to the point, because what we're doing here in the UK with social investment now in this generation is just reinventing what's been done generation and generation before that's gradually lost its way. So it's our generation reinventing it again this time, which we can.
Great, thank you. So Mary Rose, final word to you. It's really great of you to do this. Thank you. Thank you for describing the Fore earlier, because that's really excellent exemplar to add to the long list that were provided by the other speakers. So over to you, final words.
Thank you, John. I think my final words would be for people to just give it a go. I think it can seem very, very daunting getting involved in social investing or impact investing, but just give it a try. And you can start with doing it philanthropically through giving grants, but doing it with an investment mindset. If you're nervous about getting involved in larger investment deals, but everybody needs to start somewhere, and if you don't start somewhere, you'll never realize quite how exciting it can be, and the fact that it can give you both the financial return, but also obviously the completely vital social return that we all need if we're going to create the society that we all want to live in.
Okay, thank you very much. And it's important that professional advisors understand that they have a significant role to play in this whole thing, as Julian has clearly demonstrated. So thank you very much, and goodbye.